everyone, and welcome to Walking Through the Bible. The Jews have now returned from captivity and are settling now into what would become known as Judea. This land was significantly smaller than the Judah that existed prior to the captivity, but it is what Cyrus the Great allowed them to settle in. Naturally, though, there were already people living in that land, with a remnant left by Nebuchadnezzar back in 2 Kings 25, verse 22. And then, of course, there were peoples living in what had been Israel that had been transplanted there by the Assyrians, 2 Kings 17, after it had been taken captive. With almost a 3/4 of a century having passed since the Jews were taken into captivity, and almost 2 centuries having passed since Israel was taken off into captivity, the situation was ripe for tensions to be had between the returning Jews and the people of the land, tensions that we begin to see here in chapter 3 of Ezra. So if you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Ezra chapter 3. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 7. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Ezra chapter 3, beginning at verse 1. And when the 7th month had come, and the children of Israel were in the cities, the people gathered together as one man to Jerusalem. Then Jeshua the son of Jozadak and his brethren the priests, and Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and his brethren, arose and built the altar of God of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings on it, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. Though fear had come upon them because of the peoples of those countries, they set the altar on its basis, and they offered burnt offerings on it to the Lord, both the morning and the evening burnt offerings. They also kept the Feast of Tabernacles, as it is written, and offered the daily burnt offerings in the number required by the ordinance for each day. Afterwards, they offered the regular burnt offering and those for new moons and for all the appointed feasts of the Lord that were consecrated, and those of everyone who willingly offered a free will offering to the Lord. From the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, although the foundation of the temple of the Lord had not yet been laid. They also gave money to the masons and the carpenters, and food, drink, and oil to the people of Sidon and Tyre, to bring cedar logs from Lebanon to the sea, to Joppa, according to the permission which they had from Cyrus, king of Persia. As we said at the top, the remnant of the Jews have returned to what would be Judea, being led by Zerubbabel of the house of David, whom Cyrus named governor of the province. Cyrus, in releasing them, had given them a task: rebuild the temple to your God and worship him there. Coming now to chapter 3, and we arrive at the 7th month of the year, which in our months corresponds to late September, early October. Now, we don't know how long it took these Jews to return from Babylon, for such would be about a 3 to 4 month trip. But regardless, there was an important reason why the month that they began sacrificing to the Lord again in Jerusalem was the 7th month. And if we want to know the reason why, let's go back to Leviticus 23 and read verses 23 to 43. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath rest, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Also the 10th day of the 7th month shall be the day of atonement. It shall be a holy convocation for you. You shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. And you shall do no work on that same day, for it is the day of atonement, to make atonement for you before the Lord your God. For any person who is not afflicted in soul on that same day shall be cut off from the people. And any person who does any work on that same day, that person I will destroy from among his people. You shall do no manner of work on it. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest, and you shall afflict your souls. On the 9th day of the month at evening, from evening to evening, you shall celebrate your Sabbath. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of this 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days to the Lord. On the first day there shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. For 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. On the 8th day you shall have a holy convocation, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. It is a sacred assembly, and you shall do no customary work on it. These are the feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, to offer an offering made by fire to the Lord, a burnt offering and a grain offering, a sacrifice and drink offerings, everything on its day, besides the Sabbaths of the Lord, besides your gifts, besides all your vows, and besides all your freewill offerings which you give to the Lord. Also on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep the feast of the Lord for 7 days. On the 1st day there shall be a Sabbath rest, and on the 8th day a Sabbath rest. And you shall take for yourselves on the 1st day of the fruit of beautiful trees, branches of palm trees, the boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. You shall keep it as a feast to the Lord for 7 days in the year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths for 7 days. All who are native Israelites shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. As you can see then, the 7th month of the year was a sacred month of the year, for it was during this month that was the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Trumpets marked the beginning of the 10-day consecration for the Day of Atonement and marked the end of the agricultural year. The Day of Atonement, of course, was the day that the high priest entered into the Holy of Holies and sprinkled the blood on the mercy seat as a sin offering for himself and for the people. And the Feast of Tabernacles was the most joyous feast of the year, a feast of thanksgiving to God for the harvest year and a remembrance of when God had them dwell in tents after being freed from Egypt, which was marked by Israel dwelling in tents for this feast. Thus, for Judah, beginning again the sacrifices to God in this month reminded them of their sin on the Day of Atonement, but how God promised the forgiveness of sins through the sacrifices they offered to him in faith. And it also allowed them to be thankful to God for freeing them from captivity and bringing them back to their land following this captivity. The only problem that they had was there was no temple at which to offer these sacrifices, for the temple had not yet been built. Did that stop the Jews from doing what God asked? No, for Joshua the high priest and Zerubbabel the governor ensured that they built an altar to God in Jerusalem on the place where the temple would be constructed, so that the proper sacrifices could be offered. Now, of course, the complete observance on the Day of Atonement couldn't be had, for there was no Holy of Holies to bring the blood to. But the Jews of that day did what they could, and from all accounts, God was pleased. Now it is said that when they built the altar, fear had come upon them because of the people of those countries. What is meant here is that the peoples of the land that were there when the Jews returned were unhappy that this altar was being built. But even though the returning Jews had reason to fear the people, they built the altar anyway, for they knew that God would be pleased with that. This unhappiness by the surrounding people does show us that even though Cyrus had set the Jews free and allowed them to return home, that doesn't mean that the people agreed with or liked that decision. They had been in that land for decades now, and these Jews had been taken away captive. Thus, for them, it might have seemed like an invasion to allow these people to return, and what's more, building a temple in Jerusalem could interfere with these people's religious practices. This tension will be seen throughout the rebuilding of the temple, as we'll see in future lessons. For now, though, the altar of the Lord has been restored, and all the sacrifices commanded under the law of Moses were now being offered. As for the temple, money was sent by the people to those in Tyre and Sidon to provide them with wood that they could use to build the temple of the Lord. This should make sense to us, for the people of Tyre and Sidon assisted in the building of Solomon's temple. And so, since the cedars of Lebanon were still so prevalent in the area, who better to provide the timber for the temple? We'll continue on with chapter 3, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Ezra chapter 3, verses 8 to 13, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. We thank you for watching Walking Through the Bible today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. But if you like this video, we ask that you consider subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on other videos in our series, as well as share this video among your friends so that the saving message of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.